There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Vanna. Welcome to Gross Anatomy. I know this isn't live, so I won't really go into introductions because that'd be kind of weird just to talk about myself. But this is me, just so you know who's talking. This is my dog, Sir Edward. I don't have any funny memes for you guys. I'm sorry. I know the other TAs are funny, but I do have lots of pictures of this guy, so you'll be seeing a lot of him. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Directional terminology, very, very important. You will use these for the rest of the semester, probably for the rest of your careers. Um, there's definitely like a lot of new words, but the more you use them, it'll just kind of become second nature to you guys. I know by the end of the semester, when you're talking about things in relation to each other, you don't really even think twice about, these words, but definitely go ahead and get comfortable with them, get familiar with them. These are the words they're going to use in your lectures. So if you don't know what they mean, it'll be kind of hard to follow along what they're saying. And then they can use these in questions too. So if you don't know what they mean, it would make tests a lot harder. I know Dr. Cote kind of went through some examples with you guys, so I'll kind of leave this here for you guys. There's one I want to point out to you guys is the caudal and rostral. So remember, cranial means head. So we don't use cranial when talking about the placement of things, just because technically when you're on the head, really everything's cranial. So we replace the word cranial with rostral when you're describing these. So the orange dot will be rostral to the yellow dot, which will be caudal to the orange dot. Another important note, these words, you have to use them in relation to one another. So you couldn't just say that the orange dot is rostral. Although I would know what you were saying and the professors would know, they are meant to be used like in relation to one another. So kind of like we can do this one right here. So the green dot is going to be proximal to the purple dot. So you always need to have a location when you're talking about these terms. Another one I want to point out to you guys is palmar versus plantar. So when we're on the leg, kind of like the front part where the cranial part will be right here, and then the back will be caudal. So cranial here, caudal here. Once you get below the carpus, those terms, sorry. All right, once you get below the carpus, you are going to start talking dorsal, like so the top part of your paw is going to be dorsal, and then the part touching the ground will be palmar. So basically, if we took our own hand, put it on the ground, what we are touching the ground with is palmar. The part that we can see is going to be dorsal. But that's about the front paw. When you get to the back paw, we still say dorsal, but instead we're going to say plantar instead of palmar. So think about, you plant your feet on the ground, or at least we do. You're going to have plantar and palmar. I think that's all I wanted to say here. And if you guys want to go over these again when we're live and just ask questions, we can kind of review. Definitely more than open to do that. So just let me know how you guys feel about these. All right, bones of the forelimb. So we're going to have our scapula up here, and then scapula is just scapula. We have our brachium, which is also known as the humerus. These are interchangeable. I think they refer to it as brachium most of the time, but both are acceptable. Then if you go distally distal to the humerus, we have the antebrachium, which is going to be both the radius and the ulna together. So if they say antebrachium, we're talking about both of these right here. And then distal to the antebrachium, we have the manus. We'll definitely go into the manus a little bit more. I'll have a better diagram for you guys so you can see the carpal joint or the carpal bones, metacarpals, and the phalangeals down here. You're going to know like what digit is what number and the different joints down here too. So this will get into a little more detail. Other important terms to know, the glenohumeral joint is what we're going to call the shoulder joint. If you guys have already looked at bones, or we can go over them again, this fossa right here of the scapula, that's going to be the glenoid fossa, and then it's going to be like a little socket. So glenohumeral for our humerus. So that's going to be the glenohumeral joint. It is a lot of new terminology, but thankfully they do make it pretty easy for the most part. Because if you see humero, radial, ulnar, humerus, radius, and ulna down here, you would know, that's the elbow joint. So, and then the carpal joints, there'll be more specifics down here, but we'll get back to that. Right, types of bones, long bones. These are going to be, for the most part, like the bones of your limbs. So you've got your humerus, radius, and ulna. I think the key part for these is that the length is longer than the width. So we're going to go back. There we go. These bones down here, the metacarpals, these would also be considered long bones since they are longer than they are wide, even though compared to like these big bones up here, they are still pretty small. But think, long and skinny, that's going to be your long bones. Flat bone, going to be the scapula. Short bones are going to be those carpal bones. So those dudes look kind of like little squares down here is what I think about. They're kind of short and stout, not long and skinny like these guys. Sesamoid bones, we will also talk a little bit more about these later because they are important. Know these guys. But they prevent wear and tear. They kind of protect those little ligaments and tendons, or tendons, excuse me, just tendons. Prevent wear and tear in the joints. So I say special short bones, but if you think about it, the biggest sesamoid bone is actually going to be your 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 kneecap, patella. Yeah, I think it's your patella. No, anyway, your kneecap. So you'll learn about that. We did that in GA2. I'm not sure know what that's called, but anyway, for right now, kneecap, biggest sesamoid bone, but they can also be really tiny, which you guys I think will be able to see with your dissections. But these guys are important. And then your irregular bones. Think of your vertebrae. You'll get more into these. I think it's your next module, and you'll just see how different parts of your vertebral column, they all like look different, and you'll be able to tell what part of the spine you're in based on what they look like, but they all are different, so they are very irregular, and you guys will see that. There we go. All right. Long bones have a little bit extra stuff going on inside them. This is where ossification forms. So basically your cartilage is turning into bone, which is important for development. You're going to go into a lot more detail about like the physiology of this and what the tissues look like in your micro and physio classes, which will be coming soon. And it's pretty interesting. But for now, like the top, so the proximal epiphysis, distal epiphysis, those are just the ends of the bones. So you've got ossification going on here. This is going to be your growth plate. And then also in the diaphysis, which is like your bone shaft, the skinny part, specifically in the medullary cavity, which is going on in here. So if, growth or ossification here at the growth plate is going to make your bones longer, whereas in the middle, this is where your bones are going to get wider. I don't think you need to know that for this right now, but fun fact for you. Side note for you guys, anytime they mention anything of clinical relevance, just go ahead and put a little star, little heart. Definitely worth knowing. Not only are you going to need to know it, later when we're all doctors and stuff, but they comes back. So just know whenever they say that. So the growth plate, which is right here, highlighted for you guys, common location for fractures, infections, and metastasis. Basically, this is going to be like area of new growth. So anything new is going to be more prone to a lot of these things. So new puppies growing, they like to wrestle a lot, so they are more prone to fractures, even infections and stuff like that. So this is a common place for problems. Types of joints. We've got our fibrous joints. Those are going to be fixed, meaning they can't move. So think about like your skull. You can see where there's a little bit of fusion going on here. Um, and there's going to be like literally no movement here. And think about like that's a good thing. You don't want these guys moving because your brain's in there. Um, we need our brains. So um, those are basically fused together, helps protect, but remember, no movement. We have our cartilaginous joints, so a good example would be your spinal cord. Think about those thick intervertebral discs that cushion in between the bones, but again, there's no like synovial joint, there's no capsule. You can move, but you're not like abducting or circumducting or all those terms you've already learned about, with your spinal cord. Pretty much just stays on top of each other, protects it, um, but does give you a little bit of movement. And then we do have our synovial joints, which is probably what you think of when you just think of the word joint. That's going to be your elbows, your hips, your knees, wrists, all that good stuff. So we'll talk about those right now. So synovial joints. This is going to be obviously the bones. The end of the bones, or the proximal and distal parts of the bones, are going to be covered in that cartilage. That's going to be pointed out here. On the sides, or on the lateral and medial portions, you're going to have the synovial membrane, which is what actually is forming the synovial fluid inside here. And that's going to help reduce friction. It's going to help those synovial joints move and give them the most movement. Other things you need to know with synovial joints, we're going to have those ligaments. Ligaments are going to be bone to bone. You'll learn about tendons, which are going to be muscles to bone in a bit. You can have the collateral ligaments, which are going to be on the side. There it is, on the sides. And then you have cruciate ligaments, which are going to be like inside. So intracapsular, sorry, skipped a bit. Intracapsular, intra, it's going to be in. It's going to be talking about ligaments inside. So in the knee, you have these ligaments in here that make like a little bit of an X. These are going to be intra. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Inside, you do have the lateral ligaments on the side of the knee as well, but you also have them on the elbow. So those are some terminology for you guys to know. Also, what you'll see are the meniscus or the menisci. You probably have heard of these guys before. Those are also going to help joints fit together. They're going to add a little bit of extra cushion, help them fit together. So that is that. All right, movement of synovial joints. Again, love of my life, Edward, you'll see lots of him. But just needing to know how these joints move. So flexion and extension, think of like you flex your biceps, you're flexing. Extension, I put this picture of Edward. The frisbee's kind of blocking it. He kind of missed it there, but his shoulder is flexed. His whole arm is out in front of him, extending. No, I'm sorry, I just said flexed. His shoulder here is going to be in extension, trying to reach to catch his frisbee, which he missed. Here's that. That's just to give you a little idea of what that would look like. Abduction and adduction. Be careful when you're spelling these because they are really similar, but they are also very different, or similar in spelling, very different in meaning. So I think it was my TA who taught us to think, I think it, abduction, like you're being abducted. So these are the little Toy Story guys. If both of their arms are up, or like this arm would be an abduction. I think in the movie the toy claw comes down and hits them. Hopefully you guys like Disney because you'll probably see a lot of that too. Anyway, but arms up like you're being abducted by an alien. Arms down like by your side would be adduction. This picture right here, this poor dog slipping out on the ice, that'd be what like abduction would look like in a dog. So his arms, forelimbs rather, are spread out from under him. This is probably not comfortable for him, and it's because he can't get a good grip. So that's going to be more what abduction would look like in a realistic situation with a dog. Circumduction, medial and lateral rotation. You guys had pictures of those that were pretty good in your lecture. pronation and supination, these are both going to be really important. Um, Something I didn't know and never really thought of before is that most of your domestic species, so dogs, are always in a state of pronation. So think about your thumb. If you're in pronation, it's going to be on the medial aspect. So it's going to be the most medial digit. So I think, yeah, their digit 1 is always facing or closest to the medial line in the middle. So you can think about they're always in a state of pronation. Rather, if you were in supination, you'd be able to hold like a bowl of soup, which is, you know, much harder for dogs. Cats can do it a little bit more. But this is a good way to know to differentiate your pronation and supination. And this is my boyfriend's dog, Jaeger, as a puppy, showing you his pronation. Right? Joint classifications. So this is another pretty simple topic, but something you still need to know. So classification of joints, you have simple and compound. So your glenohumeral joint, oh, I have this picture down here. I don't have the whole thing, but again, this is going to be that glenoid cavity, which is where your humerus is going to fit in. So that's going to have only 2 bones making up that joint. So that's going to be a simple joint. You're going to have your humeroradial ulnar joint, which is over here. That's going to have 3 bones making that up. So that's going to be more than 2. It's going to be a compound joint. Congruent and incongruent. This picture will also be good for that. So remember I said those menisci are good for helping the joints fit together because this is an incongruent joint, so it needs a little bit of help with that. The elbow right here, these bones kind of already fit together pretty well. Again, we'll talk about the bones and their notches and fosses and all that good stuff. But it fits pretty well together, so it doesn't need a menisci. It kind of just goes together right there. Then we've got hinge and spheroidal joints. Again, this is a good example. This is like a nice little socket for a bone to go in. So this is going to be your shoulder. Another good example of a spheroidal joint would be your hip joint, which you'll get to that next semester. And then hinge moves, like hinge. So a good example would be your elbow. And just like that, we are done. So all of this stuff that we covered, it's going to be like kind of like your basis, your groundwork. Knowing all of this is going to make learning everything that's coming much, much, much easier. If you guys have any questions at all, please just post them on the Facebook, because if you have a question, odds are someone else has that same question. So we can kind of use that Facebook page as like an open forum. If you guys have any questions about just Ross things on the island, bad anatomy, definitely don't hesitate. Just throw them up there, or you can privately message me or email me. Sorry this wasn't live. Hopefully it was still informative and you guys got a little bit from it. We will definitely next week talk about muscle origins and insertions and get into that good stuff. Hopefully it doesn't overwhelm you guys. I know when I was first learning it, it was hard, but just take it little bits at a time. Don't try and do it all at once. Start with the bones, learn the bones really well, and that will also make learning the muscles much easier if you know the notches and stuff on the bones. But anyway, I will get this uploaded for you guys, and I look forward to not talking to myself next week.